All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and attitude to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakadash, Barakatham to the elders and apostles, Wa'akim, Wa'akwaf, and I say Shalom. And this is a sit down lesson of the prophecy updates as April the 4th, 2025, on this Friday noon. And this is a news article from RT.com as April the 4th, 2025, and it reads World News. China hits back at U.S. with 34% import tariffs. The following move, it says the move follows President Donald Trump's reciprocal duties on all Chinese goods. It says China will impose a 34% tariff on all imports from the U.S. starting April the 10th. It says the country's financial ministry announced on Friday. The decision follows U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement on a 34% levy on Chinese goods in the latest escalations in a tariff war. Beijing announced comes after the Ministries of Commerce condemns the U.S. tariffs, denouncing them as an unilateral bullying. It says Trump on Wednesday rolled out a broad new slate of tariffs ranging from 10% to 49% on the imports on all countries based on what the U.S. president calls their principles and reciprocity. It says China, labeled one of the worst offenders by Trump, was hit by new 34% tariffs on its exports to the U.S. on tops of existing 20% levy, bringing a total duty to a 54%. Beijing also filed a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization, the WTO, in response to the tariffs. Along with the WTO action, China Commerce Ministries introduced a new restrictions aimed at American companies. 11 U.S. firms were added to China's unreliable entities list due to their report military cooperation with Taiwan, and additionally, 16 U.S. companies were placed under a new export control measures designed to monitor the transfer of the dual-use goods. It says prior to the latest rounds of Washington duties, the U.S. and China has a sharp tariff gap. According to the Bloomberg calculations, China average tariffs in the U.S. project stood at 17.8% compared to the 32.8% left by the U.S. and China's goods. The U.S. actions does not abide by international trade rules. Severity underlines China's legitimate and law and rights and interests. In a typical unilateral bullying, the financial ministry says in a statement announcing reciprocal 34% tariffs, Beijing has dimmed the measures, warning that the damages the balance established through the years of bilateral trade negotiation has urged Washington to immediately remove the tariffs, which that's not going to happen, and the resolve of any disputes through fair and equity dialogue with trade partners. And this is the book of St. Mark, the 3rd chapter. So we're definitely going to be seeing these economical trade wars between these nations and modern-day kingdoms. So that's what we're seeing. And this is St. Mark chapter 3, verse 24. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, the kingdom cannot stand. Right, that's what we're seeing, modern-day kingdoms being divided against itself. So you're going to have a kingdom within itself being divided outside of another kingdom rise up against another kingdom. And that's what we're seeing with these economic tariffs. It says, as we're going to continue to see the rise of tensions between China and the United States over these economic tariffs. It says, if a kingdom be divided against itself, the kingdom cannot stand. Right, so if a kingdom be divided against itself, it cannot stand. St. Mark chapter 3, verse 25. And if a house be divided against itself, the house cannot stand. Right, so that's what we're seeing. It's the book of Luke 21 and verse 25. It says, and there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Upon the earth, disgrace of nations will perplex the siege which one. Right, so we're seeing an increase in disgrace of nations will perplex the siege which one. So you're going to have these economical wars, tariff wars, seditions, uprisings, uproars, people of the world, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. So as it says again, China hits back at U.S. with 34% import tariffs, I believe, which goes into effect of April the 10th. It says Ukraine's plot against Russian cadets fold, the SAB reports. It said hundreds of German cops target everyday data reports. India urged Bangladesh to avoid rhetoric that harms ties. It says Russian army is strengthening. NATO Supreme Commander mentioned. It says the Russian army is strengthening. NATO Supreme Commander reports Moscow is producing weapons in paradologist numbers. U.S. General Christopher Calavevo has claimed Washington will have it little difficult reaching its target of 1.5 million active military personnel despite the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. NATO Supreme Leader, Allied Commander in Europe, Christopher Calavevo, has predicted during a U.S. Senate Armed Service Committee's hearing on Thursday that the four-star U.S. Army general evacuated Moscow's ability to enhance its military capability. I believe the personnel that they'll be able to build as quickly as they want to. Calaveria stated reference to the launch of spring's conscripted campaign on Tuesday that aims to enroll 160,000 recruited for military training. Unlike Kyiv, Moscow does not deploy conscripts to the front lines, relying instead of volunteers. With those numbers, they will be able to constitute the front size that they choose fairly quickly. In Kovac remarks, he noted that Moscow may need a couple of years to achieve 1.5 million target. Well, I don't know, it might be sooner than that. This is Ezekiel chapter 38, because you're going to have Russia still in that warlike mindset as we have the ongoing Russia-Ukraine situations heating up, despite the fact they have a little 30-day ceasefire between both sides. And then I believe it was another news article said they ready to make a deal. But till then, we're still going to see the Russia-Ukraine escalation heating up on both sides. And we're still going to have Russia in that warlike mindset, the Russian Federation. As an added side note to that, this is Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 4. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. I will bring thee forth in all thy army, horse and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company of builders and shields, all of them handling swords. Right, so Russia is still going to be in that warlike mindset. You're still going to have Russia versus NATO, which they've been ongoing on and off. And you're still going to have the Russia-Ukraine situation as well, too. And this is the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must first come to pass, but the end is not yet. Right, it's going to come to pass, but it's not going to end just yet. So we're going to be seeing more building up in our world today of building up more wars and rumors of wars between the nations. And this is Matthew 24, verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation. Right, that's what we're seeing. Russia versus Ukraine, Russia versus NATO. That's what you call wars and rumors of wars. China versus the United States with these latest trade wars. Those are wars and rumors of wars. What's taking place down in the South China Sea. China versus Taiwan. Those are wars and rumors of wars. What's taking place, the disputed territory waters not too far from the South China Sea. That's what you call wars and rumors of wars. What's taking place over there in the Korean Peninsula, North Korea versus South Korea, Japan, the United States. Those are wars and rumors of wars. Iran versus Israel. Those are wars and rumors of wars. And we're going to continue to see that building up. And the pro-Iranian group going against the Israel Defense Force, wars and rumors of wars. Hamas going against the Israel Defense Force, wars and rumors of wars. The resistance of the Palestinians going against the IDF. Those are wars and rumors of wars. You have the pro-Iranian group and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's what you call wars and rumors of wars. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. It says, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. So you're going to have these economical wars, trade wars, wars and rumors of wars, seditions, uprises, upwards, people in the world, which you're going to continue to see increase. Because you're going to have modern day nations against modern day nations. And you're going to have a nation within itself being divided. And then you're going to have it outside of another nation rise up against another nation. This similar to you're going to have a nation within itself being divided, rise up against another nation. outside of another nation rising up against another nation against another kingdom. That's what we're going to be seeing. It says, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. Right, so earthquakes in diverse places, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilence, plagues, and earthquakes in diverse places on top of that as well too. Matthews 24 verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. Right, so all increasing beginning of sorrows, which is modern day biblical signs and signs of times that we're going to continue to see increase more and more and more. And this is the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 3, verse 8. It reads, in a time to love, in a time of HATE, in a time of war, and time of peace. Right, so we definitely live in a time of war, in a time of HATE on top of that as well, too. This is the book of Second Esdras. Second Esdras, chapter 9, and verse 3. Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars in the world, right, we're going to continue to see more increasing earthquakes and more increasing uproars in the world. And that's that Luke 20 verse 25, and that Second Esdras 9 verse 3 as well too. And this is Second Esdras 15 and verse 15. It says, for the sword of destruction draweth nigh, and one people should stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands. Right, as we're seeing the resistance of the Palestinians going against the Israel Defense Force, Hamas going against the IDF, and the pro-Iranian groups going against the Israel Defense Force, the Russia-Ukraine situation, Iran versus Israel. So we seeing one people should stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands. And that we're seeing in our world today. Second Esdras 15 verse 16. It says, for there shall be sedition among men, invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor their princes, and of course the actions stand in power. Right, so you're going to have sedition among men, which we're seeing in the world today, which is only going to continue to increase and come in full effect as well too. And we're seeing the citizens rising up against their leaders of power. That's why Scripture says they should not regard their kings or their princes, right? They modern their kings and princes and rulers in these countries due to the unrighteous decrees. That's why we have citizens protesting against them. It says, for there shall be sedition among men, invading one another. They should not regard their kings nor their princes. Of course, the actions stand in power. So we're going to be seeing more signs of that. Go to the Jerusalem Post with some prophecy updates. It says, Israel, U.S. must strike down Iran's nuclear threat. The new JINSA heads tells the Post, right, that's the signs of wars and rumors of wars. It says the IDF intercept drones from the east. Hamas said live hostages held in IDF attempt to evacuate. Russian missile hits residence area in Ukraine. Kills 12. It says the IDF conducted airstrikes east of Gaza City, reports. Right, another sign of wars and rumors of wars. It says Turkey calls Israel the greatest threat to the region. Right, and that comes within, I would say, a couple of days ago, you had the Israel Defense Force use a strike over there in Syria, sending that warning to Turkey. So we're definitely going to be, that aligns with Ezekiel the 38th chapter, because Russia is going to be a guard to Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, and Turkey, going against the Israel Defense Force. As I add a side note to that, this is a news article from Jerusalem Post by Reuters as of April the 3rd, 2025, and last updated April the 4th, 2025. It reads, Turkey calls Israel the greatest threat to the region's security. Turkey said that Thursday that Israel must withdraw from Syria, which that's not going to happen. That was the same thing the Syrian president said to the Israel Defense Force, said they to withdraw from over there in Syria because of the building up military deployment from the Israel Defense Force over there in Syria. It says and stop harming destabilization efforts there after Israel step up airstrikes, right? Because they've been stepping up their airstrikes throughout over there in Syria and throughout Lebanon as well too. Stepping up their airstrikes in neighboring country and accusing Turkey of trying to turn Syria into a Turkish protectorate. Israel has become the greatest threat to regional security, and it's a strategic destabilizer, causing chaos and feeding terrorism. The foreign minister Ankara said. It says therefore, in order to establish security throughout the region, Israel must first abandon the specialist policies, withdraw from the terrorists it occupies a stable, undermining efforts to establish stability in Syria, it said. Right, so that's signs of wars, aromas of wars. Bring up that Isaiah. Yeah, Isaiah 17 and verse 1. Because as I've been mentioning again previously, Syria, as of late, been a hot zone area. This is Isaiah chapter 17 and verse 1. Behold, Damascus shall be taken away from any city, and it shall be a rural heap. That's why it says, and that makes sense. It says, Turkey calls for Israel the greatest threat to the regional security, and that's over there in Syria. That's why you're going to continue to see the Israel Defense Force using heavy airstrikes over there near Damascus and throughout over there in Damascus as well too. So this is a future prophecy of Isaiah 17 and verse 1. I'm going to get back into that Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, because Russia is going to be a guard to these nations of Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, and Turkey, as they're going to continue to target the Israel Defense Force over there in Western Asia. It says Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 5. It says Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, with all of them with shield of helmet. Right, because you're having the rise of tensions between Iran versus Israel and Turkey versus Israel as well too. It says Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, with all of them with shield of helmet. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 6. Gomer, which the Turkish armies recently called the Israel Defense Force the biggest threat to the biggest threat and their security stability over in the region, over in Western Asia. As we've been having the Turkish armies going against the Kurdistan armies at the same time throughout Iraq and Syria, and they going against the Israel Defense Force as well too. Recently been calling them out as well too. It says Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the North Quarters, and all his bands, many people with thee. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 7. Be thou prepared, prepare for thyself and all thy companies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Right, so Russia is going to be guarding these nations targeting the Israel Defense Force, because Russia is going to be guarding these nations of Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, and Turkey. And the dragons of Arabia, they all going to team up together going against the Israel Defense Force. So we're seeing signs of that. And that's only going to build up to the Third World War, which we're seeing. And this is the prophet Joel, chapter 3, verse 9. It says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, right as we're seeing, as the nations continue to be gathered up over there in Western Asia, as it's building up to the Third World War. Joel chapter 3, verse 10, beat your plowshares and the swords and plodding hooks and the spears, and let the weak stand strong. Right, so all these nations are going to come together and they're going to team up with, Russia's going to be a guard unto them and let the weak stand strong. So they be going against the Israel Defense Force. This is Revelation chapter 11, verse 14. Then I'm going to close out. Yep, this is Revelation 11, verse 14. The second will pass, behold, the third will come quickly. Right, so the second will pass, behold, the third will come quickly. So with that, hopefully this sit down lesson was edifying of the prophecy updates as of April the 4th, 2025 on this Friday noon. So with that, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai Ba'Hashem Akakadash, Barak Thumb to the elders and apostles of Akim Akra. Until next time, I would say Shalom. Yeah.